Hi everyone, this is the second video about setting up the RaftMaster Deep Water Culture Frame. Today we'll go over all the additional parts that are not included with the framing kit. This is just how we set up our demo system, but there are plenty of other clever methods that people use. This video is brought to you in part by our top Patreon contributors, which are greenlifeplanet.net, trueaquaponics.com, and glassbottleoutlet.com. I will leave in the description below links to their website, and I'd appreciate it if you gave them a visit. We'll start off with getting the base ready. You may remember in the first video that I put down a stone base instead of something softer like sand. This is because I'm putting down foam board to help insulate the water from the ground. Even if you don't use foam board, I still recommend putting down some type of protection to minimize the risk of puncturing your liner from sharp stones, sticks, or rodents. 3/4 inch or 1 inch foam board works well, but it can be expensive. I've seen several people use old carpeting, which is fairly easy to get from anyone that installs carpeting. This is 2-foot foam board, so it needs to be cut down just over 1 inch so it can fit between each rib. Each piece can drop in between each rib section and provides a great base for the liner. Next up is installing the liner. Any of the reinforced liners like Durascrim or Ultrascrim will work well. Before rolling it out, you want to take one last check at the base to make sure there are no objects that will poke through the liner. Once it's rolled out, you want to have some extra material hanging over the edges. It's far easier to cut it too long versus cutting it too short and starting over. Once it's cut, you can clamp it to the side using the snap clamps that are provided with the RaftMaster frame. Depending on the width of your RaftMaster, you may have to unfold the liner and work some of the wrinkles out. If you have to walk on the liner, take your shoes off and walk on it with just socks. When the liner is set up properly, it should follow the curvature of the raft frame. This liner was a couple of feet wider than I needed, so I readjusted it in the frame and left extra hanging over the frame. This will help to protect the filled section of the liner from potential projectiles from the lawnmower. Folding the corners isn't too difficult. I put a couple of clamps in the center to hold the liner in place, then just sort of form the liner to match the curvature of the frame. It's important to make sure the edge of the liner is never below the water line, or the water will pour out. Once it's all set, just go around the frame and clip in the remaining clamps. The last part is to connect the new bed into the rest of my system. My ultimate goal is to keep this as an independent loop so that it can be disconnected and drained during the winter. For the supply line, the plan is to tap into the return line that pumps the water from the sump tank to the fish tank. I took the pump out and added a T with a ball valve into it. This will connect to the line that will go out to the new bed. The drain line is a bit trickier to install. I wanted it to drain without needing another pump, which doesn't leave a lot of slope in the drain line. I'm going to take the risk and bury the supply and drain lines just below the ground. Leaving them above runs the risk of driving the tractor over it. However, keeping it this shallow will also subject the piping to frost heaving over the winter. It's painful to do it, but in order to get the drain and supply line outside, I had to punch a hole through the foundation wall. Some holes with the hammer drill and a few whacks with the hammer and it breaks right out. The rest of the trench is easy to dig out, but still has the typical collection of rocks in it. I also had to lift the new bed out of the way a bit so I could dig under it for the drain. In hindsight, it may have been easier to dig out the trench before installing the liner. Without causing too much harm to the existing drains, I was able to move them, add another T, and connect the drain line from the outside through the wall. In the trench, I did add a rubber gasket onto the drain so that there would be some additional flexibility in the line in case of frost heaving. The trench is filled with stone to protect the pipe, and as I mentioned earlier, it's nearly level, so I'm basically relying on the head pressure from the raft bed to force the water through the line. To connect the plumbing into the raft, I'm going to use the bulkhead fitting. Most fittings come with a gasket, so this makes a good template to draw the size of the hole. With a sharp razor knife, I carefully cut through the liner, and then I also cut a hole through the foam board large enough for the entire bulkhead fitting to fit through it. So I didn't have to mess with the fittings after the raft. I pre-assembled the assorted fittings to the bulkhead, then inserted it through the liner and tightened onto the liner. Within another section of protective conduit, I'm also installing the water line, air line, and electrical feed. Then backfilling the rest of the trench with some more stone and the remaining dirt, while picking out the larger rocks. I've started filling the new RaftMaster bed with water. Even though I'm not quite ready to start using it, it's a good idea to cover the water to help minimize algae growth. For our rafts, we're using the 1-inch Dow foundation foam board, which can be cut in half to make a standard 2x4 foot raft. I'm not going to put holes in them until I'm ready to start planting. While it's filling, I can finish putting in the supply line. However, I was short a few fittings, so I'm just going to use a few spring clamps to temporarily hold the pipe in place. It's a bit crude, but it works. As the bed is filling, I can also install the overflow piping. I like to angle it so it's close to the edge to help maximize my raft spacing. I also don't glue any of the pieces together, so it can be adjusted as needed. As a perfect example of do as I say, not as I do, you can see that once the bed is filled, the entire frame isn't level from one end to the other by about 1.5 inches. I should have used a laser level or water tube level to check my base instead of a framing level. So that's about it for today. Believe it or not, I'm going to have one more video about this RaftMaster frame. And also I want to show you this awesome t-shirt that comes from Root Ramble. And if you go to the description below, there will be a link on how you can get these shirts and other great pieces of apparel for 15% off for a limited time only. Thanks for watching.